my God. Did the UFO just destroy that nuke that was flying in? Well, according to some UFO researchers, this has happened before. Before we get into this video, if you like videos on strange and weird subjects, I mean, we've done a few ghost hunts, for example, conspiracy theory videos, anything like that, hit the subscribe button because that's kind of what we're leaning in towards. Kind of like making those type of videos. Anyway, let's get back to the video. There have only been 2 instances of a nuclear attack in history. Both took place in August of 1945 by the United States military with the consent of the UK and Canada. On August 6 and August 9, the US detonated 2 atomic bombs over the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. From these 2 bombings, between 129,000 and 226,000 people died, most of whom were civilians. Nearly half of the casualties died on the day of each bombing, while many of the others died weeks to months later due to malnutrition, radiation sicknesses, burns, and other injuries and illnesses. On August 15th, 6 days after the second bomb was dropped, the Japanese government surrendered to the Allies. They then signed the Instrument of Surrender on September 2nd, effectively ending World War II. Since then, there's never been another nuclear attack in history. But with escalations between NATO and Russia and Ukraine, we're reaching a point where there's a chance we could see another one. Hopefully we don't. With the nuclear tensions between the East and the West, it's like our modern day Cold War. Nuclear Armageddon and nuclear strikes have been covering in the news lately. However, some joke the aliens would intervene and would not allow us to nuke each other to death. Hell, that was even mentioned on Joe Rogan's podcast last week. JRE 1883, the one with the Navy pilot.
Because one of the things that has been discussed by many people that have experienced these things on military bases is their ability to shut down bases, like these nuclear facilities.
It's a very good episode, and I highly recommend you check out that one as well as the one with Commander David Fravor. Anyway, all this talk with nukes and UFOs has inspired me to research a topic that has interested me. It's a topic that you've heard mentioned before in the past, but I didn't really look too much into it. And that is the conspiracy that UFOs have manipulated nukes in the past, either by disabling them or cutting them on or toying with us. Before I get into the juicy bits, I need to make a statement. I don't necessarily believe all the reports that I'm about to give you about UFOs deactivating nukes. I'm a conspiracy theorist now, don't get me wrong, but I have my limit. Regardless, this is a fun topic, so let's just get into it. It's March 16th, 1967. A cool night at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, when suddenly 10 nuclear missiles malfunctioned, one after another. United States Air Force Colonel Walter Feigl, one of 2 launch officers on duty, was confused, and then suddenly he received startling news from the guards at ground level. The guards were reporting there was a large round object hovering over the guards. Skeptical, Feigl deployed a security team to investigate. They also reported seeing a UFO. This became known as the Echo Incident. Days later, at the exact same military base, Air Force Captain Robert Salas was on guard underground at a missile silo. He received a phone call from the guards who were above ground. They were expressing concerns about strange lights in the sky. Robert just thought they were messing with him. These guys, a lot of these guys pulling my leg. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, the guards were extremely frightened. They said they were looking right at the thing. A glowing red object, oval-shaped, 40 foot in diameter, was hovering right above the gate. Shortly after, 10 ICMs, intercontinental missiles, that Robert was overseeing had become inoperable. This is extremely dangerous for national security. This incident would then go on to be known as the Oscar Flight Incident. The 2 testimonies I just told you about were given to Robert Hastings, a UFO researcher. According to Robert, more than 120 former service members have come forward and told him they have seen UFOs flying near nuclear weapon storages and testing grounds. Strangely enough, though, according to Robert, an incident like this happened again, way more recently. October 2010, Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, temporarily lost the ability to communicate with 50 of its ICBMs, the Minuteman III missiles to be exact. This news leaked and the Atlantic covered it 3 days later. However, according to Robert Hastings, the UFO researcher that I'm referencing all this information from, the Atlantic didn't cover everything. Hastings has said the individuals working that night reported seeing numerous and enormous cigar-shaped craft that maneuvered high above the missile field the day of the disruption. And according to Hastings, the military officials that saw these UFOs had to report this anonymously because they were under strict instructions not to talk to journalists or researchers about what they saw in the sky, or they risked serious consequences. UFOs manipulating nukes isn't a US only problem, however. On October 4th, 1982, near Ukrainian town of... I'm not butchering that name. See it here on the screen. A disc-shaped object was hovering over intermediate range ballistic missile, or an IRBM, for an extended period of time. Suddenly, multiple nuclear missiles activated without authorization. This happened with no authority from Moscow or the launch officers themselves. And then suddenly, they were preparing to launch. However, it seems like they eventually got them under control, considering we haven't had nuclear Armageddon yet. Another interesting point, though, from Robert Hastings is not all the UFO sightings over military bases necessarily mess with the missiles. There are reports in December 1980 near 2 Royal Air Force bases in Suffolk, England, of identified phenomena. Several U.S. Air Force personnel reported seeing strange metallic objects hovering over the Rendlesham Forest near the base. Colonel Charles Halt, who was the deputy base commander of the RAF Bentwaters, which is another base nearby, said they saw strange lights in the forest. So they sent out 3 patrolmen to see, hey, what the hell's going on? The 3 patrolmen reported seeing a triangular craft, approximately 3 meters on the side, dark metallic in appearance with strange markings. They observed it for a time and then it silently vanished, high speeds. 2 days later, Colonel Halt investigated another sighting near the base. There he found indentation in the ground, as well as broken branches and low-level background radiation. Once again, all these testimonies and reportings that I've given you come from Robert Hastings himself. He said he's investigated this, and a lot of this information were testimonies given to him. All my sources for this information will be linked down in the description below. Hastings has suggested that the presence of such phenomena meant that the aliens were monitoring us or our weapons, or even trying to warn us, warning us that we're playing with fire. And when it comes to some of our weaponry, especially nuclear bombs, we have to be careful and try to seek a peaceful solution and not to deploy them. But what do you think? Do you think UFOs have manipulated nukes in the past, or any other missiles for that being? With more emerging news and declassifications and mainstream chatter about UFOs, the stigma around it's dying. You aren't seen as crazy when you talk about it now. For example, the Pentagon released those UFO videos in 2020, you know, the Go Fast and the Gimbal video, where 3 Navy jets recorded UFOs.
Roger, there's troubleshooting.
And then the New York Times then took that footage and that story and made an article about it. That's right, the New York Times wrote about UFOs in 2020, in case you missed it. I know that was a crazy year. We were dealing with the COOF. I mean, it was so crazy that, like, the government basically admitted, like, hey, there's UFOs. Not saying they're aliens, but there's UFOs. And we were all like, whatever, bro. We got a lot going on. Personally, with those 2 episodes of Joe Rogan I mentioned earlier with the Navy pilots talking about UFOs, with their video then being released by the Pentagon and